This week, we're learning about sequential art, which includes but is not limited to comic strips, graphic novels, and diagrams. A lot of the information that I have about how sequential art works comes from Scott McCloud and his books. He's an author and illustrator. And as we learn about sequential art, I'll be referencing a lot of Scott McCloud's ideas. He's written and illustrated these books on comics, and he did a lot of research from other folks as well. If you'd like to learn more about sequential art and comics in general, Scott McCloud's books are really great resources. Okay, let's get started. Sequential art is art that shows movement or tells a story by repeating the same subject. Sequential art has been around for centuries, and it didn't always show motion, but our project this week is all about showing motion. So that's what I'll be concentrating on for this presentation. Why do we use sequential art? Historically, it tells a story, so it's part of our entertainment, and it also can help us give instructions through diagrams. In entertainment, we are very used to seeing comedy comics like Garfield or Calvin and Hobbes, or graphic novels like Just Jamie by Terry Libinson, and superhero comics like Black Panther. For instruction, we see sequential art in textbooks, cookbooks, and instruction manuals. Like in these diagrams where you see the repeated soccer ball or repeated pot of food, or some hands doing some actions with electronics. One of my favorite examples of sequential art helping people understand through diagrams is sign language. In these diagrams, you see the same person. It's not two people, they're not twins. They're the same person, but the movement of their hands helps us learn different signs for different things that we can say with American Sign Language. Notice how all the diagrams repeated something? It helps to simplify your drawing so that it's easy to repeat the same subject and easy to get your idea across. In this artwork, you can see that they've repeated the hand, but it's a lot harder to read. We've got some arrows to help us. Often diagrams will show some arrows, and sometimes even sequential art for entertainment will do the same. Before we can get started telling a story or showing motion, we have to decide how we'll draw our subject. Characters or ideas in sequential art are often made more abstract. This makes them easier to read and understand. It also makes them easier to draw. Make sure that your character or subject is abstracted or more abstract and simplified. In Scott McCloud's books, he talks about how that also helps us relate better to the characters in the sequential art, because we can see ourselves in that character because it's more of a symbol than a specific person. Cells. Comic books and graphic novels typically use rectangles or squares for cell shapes. The cells are where the story gets told. Sometimes artists will change the way cells work or their shapes to make it more exciting or creative. Sometimes to emphasize a part of the comic to make something more clear or important, they'll reorder the cells or the order of understanding, like in this comic strip about cell biology, which is a different kind of cell, in the center of this page. They show what the scientists are looking at in the microscope in the center of the comic strip so that we all know what's happening when they look through that microscope. Sometimes artists get really complicated with their cells. You don't need to get complicated, but it's fun to study comic panels that are complicated. And sometimes artists won't use cells at all. This can make the action seem faster or more surprising. There's lots of jobs that require or use sequential art. Some of them listed here are illustrator, like a comic book artist or graphic novel artist, or a graphic designer for textbooks or directions in books and in pamphlets, or an animator, which is definitely something I'd love to talk about on a different day. In the picture, you see Adrian Alfona, the illustrator of comic books like Ms. Marvel and Runaways. Your assignment this week is to make a comic strip with at least 3 cells and at least 1 character. First, you should design a character, your subject, that is easy for you to draw over and over. You may start with a stick figure, but you need to change it to all shapes and not just lines, something that you can color in. Keep it simple. It does not have to be human. Secondly, draw your character moving using 3 cells to show that movement. Examples of movement include throwing a ball, hopping, doing a high five, slipping on ice, building something. Be creative. Optional challenges, if you think that's super easy, you could draw and show motion with more than 3 cells. You could tell a story and use movement in that story, have more than 1 character or subject, change the shape of your cells, include a part of the story that has no cells but still shows motion, add color. You could create a whole comic book. You could show motion with just one part of the body, like the head, the feet, or the hands. All right, I cannot wait to see what you make, and I'm going to do a little demonstration to show how it's done.